the Poetry Center, bringing poetry to Paterson since 1980 at Passaic County Community College.
Our next reader is Terence Hayes. Terrance was born in Columbia, South Carolina in 1971. He's the author of Hip Logic, published by Penguin in 2002, and Muscular Music, Chiachucha Press, 1999. His honors include a Whiting Writers Award, the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, a National Poetry Series Award, a Pushcart Prize, a Best American Poetry Selection, and a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. Wind in a Box, his third book, is forthcoming from Penguin in the spring of 2006. Exploring imagination, desire, and race, Hayes' poems look at the intersections and tensions of autobiography and culture, an interest which has recently resulted in award-winning poems that reinvent the personas of male artists and icons like Michael Jackson, Melvin Van Peebles, and David Bowie. He's an associate professor of creative writing at Carnegie Mellon University and lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with his family. And I also want to say that I am so pleased to meet Terrance in person. I knew him only from his poems, which I loved. So I'm very happy to actually meet the person who wrote those poems, Terence Hayes.
All right. Let's see. This thing here.
Oh gosh. I told him he should give me about 7 inches.
You guys can hear me, right?
I will just look.
Okay. Somebody need to come down a little bit? Come down a little bit. I can't adjust this. I'll just squat.
No, I will adjust.
Oh, okay. Well, it is very good to be here. I've heard that there's going to be an open mic, and I'm just going to put in a request that I hope the folk in my workshop will read and share. I'm sure they have other great things, but I hope they'll share what they wrote today, which was some pretty phenomenal stuff coming out of Neruda. So I'll try not to talk too much. Let me try to keep track of my time here. 138, 105, 10, 15. Okay, so yeah, like 105 or so. I'm actually going to start with a poem from Muscular Music. I hadn't been reading Muscular Music very much because mostly I just want to read my most recent stuff all the time, and people tell me that's not good business because people can't buy the poems that you've just written, which I know is true, but nonetheless, that's mostly what I want to read. But Muscular Music was recently reprinted, and so I'm going to read just a few poems from there because they feel, new. It's been so long since I read them. And one of those poems actually is a poem that Maria took, and I feel like, maybe I had published a few places before then, but this, I felt like it was a very affirming thing that happened for me when she took this poem for identity lessons. It was an anthology, and I was in it with other poets that I had read and that I really liked, and so it was important to me. And it's still, it's an important poem for me, even, otherwise. So it's called Late. It's from my mom. And I was thinking, it's in February. I have a few February poems, so there must be something about that month. I think it was the month of my conception or something. So it's a February poem. Late for my mother. This late, no one is clean. Not the bus's worn blue seats which keep themselves company, or the nurse in her drowsy yellow uniform. It's February, and I haven't spoken to my mother since she told me to take my shit and go. Her face bare and serious as a wall. The driver waves a gloved hand at a passing bus, slow and half empty like us. Heads of the riders turned so that I cannot say how they appear. I was not born in this place, but it is where I will try to live. The miles between my mother and here stretching me into more of a man than my father, who'd drive from his out-of-state job each weekend to let her break his skin. I'm glad I've left her sitting in that house waiting for her nails to grow. Once, she pulled a gun on me because, as she told the police, I was too big for a belt. I called them, but they did not take her away. Later, my father drove home and said, "Never put our business in the street." So I shouldn't be telling you this. How we sat in that house like a family while a small light beat the blinds. My mother stubborn as a girl who will not comb her hair. There is no light beyond the windows of this bus. I am given my face transparent and bare on the glass. After my father left that night, the two of us sat apart in the living room as the TV lit the walls, the old white gown trembling on her shoulders like the wings of a moth. I will say I did not know she began to cry. I was 18, trying to be a man. I am the same thing I've always been, a son. I do not know my mother, but I want to touch her now as I did not then. And I'll read just one more from this book. And since the whole, between Maria and myself, these ongoing jokes about size, I thought I'd read this poem about big people. So the poem is called...
It's jealousy.
Yeah.
I need to be stretched.
So it's called Goliath poem, although Goliath isn't in it, but you can see why. King Kong is in it, but Goliath isn't. I am always sorry for the big ape falling from the empire for love. Or Esau, a big man begging his father for even a breadcrumb of thy grace. Sly brother Jacob scampering off to seed a nation. Dudes like that, all muscle and hands weeping on the shoulder of regret, which is a kind of blindness, a recognition come too late. Sometimes I am sorry for Rick, whom I love wherever he may be, 6'8", hurling stones through the window of another woman who's turned him away, and I too far this time to drive to him in the night. Who will save the big men of this world? Earlier, I watched King Kong and was sorry again for those building-sized suckers we see falling from miles away. Those we thought invincible, almost permanent, like the sun, which burns truthfully only a few hours each day. Once, when his girlfriend called me, I drove in the rain from college to his house. Nintendo cords roped his shoes, a bottle of pills between his thighs. He sat on the couch. In the darkness, we could have been the same. Perhaps I thought of holding him, my twin, or thought of another door and my father weeping beyond it a month before. I could have talked about the horse on its carousel, how each man lowers his head to circle blindly his life. But we said nothing. We listened to the sound of rain like a big man's tears, the sound God made before the word or light. And the moon curved above us like an ear. So some poems from Hip Logic, and you see like poems get stranger as the books go on. So I have these strange poems, and I'm not even going to explain to you the premise. They're kind of a made-up form, and it'll take too long to go through them. But this is what I'll tell you. The title of the poem, I got the title like out of the newspaper. So the word was bowling. That was going to be the subject of the poem. And then there's other stuff going on, but that's all you have to know. So for this one, it was a hard one. I thought bowling, I don't know what that poem was going to be. But inevitably, I came up with kind of a persona poem. So it's in the voice of a housewife whose husband is a chronic bowler. And I'm not going to change my voice. You just have to imagine that I'm a housewife. Bowling. He got home late and lingered in the kitchen, and when I heard his wingtips shuffling down the hall, I imagined a lion entering the bedroom. I lit a candle and began to glow. I was in the same fire pink gown I wore on our wedding night, the one I won playing bingo. I said, let's not talk about those glib pins at the edge of a lane, and stretched as his long fold-out fingers approached. But when he asked me to blow on his chicken noodle soup to cool it down, my sweat began to boil. Yes, I threw the soup on him, Your Honor. Then I threw the bowl. Let me see here. So here's one. This one is nuclear. And so it's interesting because I was thinking about Japan and nuclear warfare, and it was before September 11th. But since September 11th, I've read it, and people have said to me they think that it's connected somehow. So I'll read this one. Nuclear. And these are short poems. These poems are 11 lines long. Nuclear. How to make a nation say uncle. In other words, how to rule. We learn there will be no clue before it happens, no clear sign from the cosmos. A clandestine airplane will appear wrapped in the lace of a black dream. Then a flash like an ulcer bursting in God's gut. Citizens who goggle and race about the city as the sky becomes a cauldron and the bones burn clean. Two more of these. Preface. It was just, again, that's just the word I had. So the deal is like the word is preface, P-R-E-F-A-C-E. And within that word, there's like face and peer. And so what I was doing was, this is my word, and I would pull all the words that I could out of that word and use those words in the poem. So I don't want to tell you that because you might be listening for the words, but they're there. And it was just something because I'm, a little bit obsessive compulsive. So that's how I was dealing with it. So there's two more. This one is preface. Well, ain't your mouth a pretty little pacemaker? And that tongue is a carp I'd sure like to harpoon. We could eat crepe Suzettes in the dim cafe below your hypothalamus. I'd pull the last pear from a pear tree. We could peer over the ridge of your throat or creep down the ladder until we reach the reef. But before setting forth, you should accept whatever's free. Because baby, I've got at least an acre of desires you can reap. And so this last of these series, and maybe I'll just read one more poem in this book before moving on to some other stuff. Well, maybe two more poems. So this last one was segregate, and that was the word. I pulled it out of the paper in the word puzzle section, segregate, so it's got like rage in it, gate, and tear, and I was so excited. And so I said to my wife, oh, and I'm gonna write a race poem now, and she kind of rolled her eyes, and she was like, man, all your poems are race poems. Really? So, which may or may not be true, we'll see. So anyway, so segregate is the word. On the first morning of school, there is a young tree frog waiting patiently at the front gate. Since this means there will be no classes for the rest of the day, the children dump their school gear in their lockers and hustle to the windows to stare. The girls are eager to transform him with a kiss. The boys eager to see him on the basketball court. But the principal greets him with a "get the hell out of here." A security guard fetches the tear gas. Some of the older teachers crowd in the doorway like befuddled geese. You belong in our swamps, not our schools, they rage. But clearly, the cool-blooded amphibian American does not agree. Let's see here. Okay, I'll read one more. And this is, it's a change of tone. This is the last poem in the book, in Hip Logic. And I usually say, just so people know going in, it's for my, my stepdad. But he's my dad. He's been there for a long time. So it's called The Same City. The rain falling on a night in mid-December, I pulled to my father's engine, wondering how long I'll remember this. His car is dead. He connects jumper cables to his battery, then to mine, without looking in at me and the child. Water beads on the windshields, the road sign, his thin blue coat. I'd get out now, prove I can stand with him in the cold, but he told me to stay with the infant. I wrap her in the blanket, staring for a long time into her open, toothless mouth, and I wish she was mine. I feed her an orange softened first in my mouth, chew gently until the juice runs down my fingers as I squeeze it into hers. What could any of this matter to another man passing on his way to his family? His radio deafening the sound of water and breathing along all the roads bound to his. But to rescue a soul is as close as anyone comes to God. Think of Noah lifting a small black bird from its nest. Think of Joseph raising a son that wasn't his. Let me begin again. I want to be holy. In rain, I pulled to my stepfather's car with my girlfriend's infant. She was pregnant when we met, but we'd make love. We'd make love below stars and shingles while the baby kicked in the world between us. Perhaps a man whose young child bears his face, whose wife waits as he drives home through rain and darkness, perhaps that man would call me a fool. So what? There is one thing I'll remember all my life. It is as small and holy as the mouth of an infant. It is as speechless. When his car would not stir, my father climbed in beside me, took the orange from my hand, took the baby in his arms. In 1974, this man met my mother for the first time as I cried or slept in the same city that holds us tonight. If you ever tell my story, say that's the year I was born. Okay, let's see what we got in here. I've had some requests, so that's gonna impact what I read, I guess. So I have these persona poems, which I think were mentioned in the introduction, and I'll just read a few of them. This one, I have to read because I'm in his stomping grounds. And so these are people that are interesting to me and people that I kind of obsess over, like, Bowie. Although I do personas of myself too, so I don't know how that figures into that whole thing. But I'll read a few of those. But this one is Baraka, or Mary Baraka. And so it's they all have blue for whatever reasons, the blue Baraka, the blue Terrance, the blue Bowie. So this is the blue Baraka. We go way back, America, like mutts in the bed of a pickup, like righteous indignations, like riotous ignitions, like far right-wing indicators blinking, white and black, white and black, white and black. They don't share our values, you say. You gave me my life, I gave you my life, America. Some of us fog up the grapes and some of us vomit money. Some of us bag boys, some of us Leroy, some of us Charlie 2 Browns 2, some of us black-eyed, brown-eyed idler. Some of us be best friends or fried fiends, but all of us be floundering interiors, be all these things at once, America. Why you be? Why you be decked in suits of metal, indefatigable, empty, fat, inflatable, laughable, and lost? Why you be funkying up the holy waters and memorizing the same biblical bullshit? He shall separate us one from the other as a shepherd divideth his sheep, you say. He shall divide up the chain from the gang, divide up the pepper from the pepper spray, you say. You say they don't share our values. America, how you talk with such little lips? How you sleep with such little rhythm? How you live with such little music? You be your own ship at sea. You be your own shadow off course. The last hour, the shroud of transgression. You be a white, blue, and ready-made utopia for some. You be overcooked and crooked, a scythe of bite marks, an odor of orders for others. And so, having kids, all kinds of things kind of make their way into your work sometimes. So this one is, the Blue Seuss. Like thinking about, if Dr. Seuss was contemplating race, what would he come up with? So this is the Blue Seuss. Blacks in one box, blacks in two box, blacks on blacks stacked in boxes, stacked on boxes, blacks in boxes stacked on shores, blacks in boxes stacked on boats in darkness, blacks in boxes do not float, blacks in boxes count their losses, blacks on boat docks, blacks on auction, blacks on wagons, blacks with the masters in the houses, blacks with bosses in the fields, blacks in helmets toting rifles, blacks in Harlem toting banjos, boots and quilts, blacks on foot, blacks on buses, blacks on backwood, hardwood stages singing blues, blacks on Broadway singing too. Blacks can Charleston, blacks can foxtrot, blacks can beatbox, blacks can moonwalk, blacks can bebop, blacks can run fast too. Blacks on blacks and blacks on knees and blacks on couches, blacks on good times, blacks on roots, blacks on Cosby. Blacks in voting booths are blacks in boxes. Blacks beside blacks in rows of houses are blacks in boxes too. Okay, let me see here. So yeah, I'll read, so the title of this book, I'll read some of these Blue Terrance poems and then I'll read some of these title poems. So yeah, inevitably I just started thinking about like the whole idea of personas. After I'd written quite a few of those blue poems, I thought, well, what if I do like the persona of me, So this is the Blue, I'll read two of these. I have, a couple of them in the book. This is the Blue Terrance. I come from a long line hollowed out on a dry night, the first son in a line of someone else's children, afraid of water, closets, other people's weapons, hunger, and stupidity. Afraid of the elderly and the new dead, bodies tanned by lightning. Afraid of dogs without ethos, each white fang on the long walk home. I believe all the stories of who I was, a hardback book, a tent behind the house of a grandmother who was not my grandmother, the smell of beer, which is a smell like sweat. They say I climbed to the roof with a box of light bulbs beneath my arm. Before the bricks, there were trees. Before the trees, there were lovers barely rooted to the field. But let's not talk about them, it makes me blue. I come from boys throwing rocks bigger than their fists at the head of the burned girl, her white legs webbed as lace on a doily. In someone's garage, there was a flashlight on two dogs pinched in heat. And later, a few of the puppies born dead and too small to be missed. I come from howls sent up all night and all day, summers below the hoop and board nailed to a pine tree. I come from light bulbs glowing with no light and no expressions, thrown as far as the will allows like a night chore, like a god changing his mind. From the light broken on the black road leading to my mother. Tell me what you remember of her, now that her walk is old, now that the bone in her hip strains to heal its fracture. I come from the hot season, gathering its things and leaving. I come from the dirt road leading to the paved one. I will not return to the earth as if I had never been born. I will not wait to become a bird dark enough to bury itself in midair. I wake up sometimes in the middle of this country with fur on my neck. Where did they bury my dog after she hung herself? And into what roots of what tree are those bones entangled? I come blessed like a river of black rock, like a long secret, and the kind of kindness like a door that is closed but not locked. Yesterday, I was nothing but a road heading in 4 directions. When I threatened to run away, my mother said she would take me wherever I wanted to go. I guess I'll just read that one, and I'll read some of these title poems and then finish up with a few new poems. So, there are actually about 6 poems in this book with the title Wind in a Box. And they, I was telling my editor, who was telling me, you should do Wind in a Box Part 1, Part 2, Part 3 to help everybody. And I was like, it's just a coincidence that they happen to have the same title. They're not a sequence, they just happen to have the same title. I don't know if he bought it, but. So I had a request for this opening one that I read, Wind in a Box. This ink, this name, this blood, this blunder, this blood, this loss, this lonesome wind, this canyon, this twin swiftly paddling shadow blooming an inch above the carpet, this cry, this mud, this shudder, this is where I stood, by the bed, by the door, by the window, in the night, How deep, how often must a woman be touched? How deep, How often have I been touched? On the bone, on the shoulder, on the brow, on the knuckle, touch like a last name, touch like a wet match, touch like an empty shoe and an empty shoe, sweet and incomprehensible. This ink, this name, this blood and wonder, this box, this body in a box, this blood in the body, this wind in the blood. Wind in a box. I want to always sleep beneath a bright red blanket of leaves. I want to never wear a coat of ice. I want to learn to walk without blinking. I want to outlive the turtle and the turtle's father, the stone. I want a mouth full of permissions and a pink, glistening bud. If the wildflower and the anthill can return after sleeping each season, I want to walk out of this house wearing nothing but wind. I want to greet you. I want to wait for the bus with you, weighing less than a chill. I want to fight off the boats of gray, lighting the alcoves and winding paths of your hair. I want to fight off the damp nudgings of snow. I want to fight off the wind. I want to be the wind, and I want to fight off the wind with its sagging banner of isolation, its swinging screen doors, its gilded boxes and neatly folded pamphlets of noise. I want to fight off the dull, straight lines of 2x4s and endings, your disapprovals, your doubts and regulations, your carbon copies. If the locust can abandon its suit, I want a brand new name. I want the pepper's fury and the salt's tenderness. I want the virtue of the evening rain, but not its gossip. I want the moon's intuition, but not its questions. I want the malice of nothing on earth. I want to enter every room in a strange, electrified city and find you there. I want your lips on the bell of flesh at the bottom of my ear. I want to be the mirror, but not the nightstand. I do not want to be the light switch. I do not want to be the yellow photograph or book of poems. When I leave this body, woman, I want to be pure flame. I want to be your song. You know what, we'll do like two more poems. One more Wind in a Box poem and then two new poems and I'll be done. So this is the last of the Wind in a Box poems I'll read. Wind in a Box. I claim in the last hour of this known hysterical breathing that I have nothing to give but a signature of wind, my typewritten handwriting reconfiguring the past. To the boy with no news of my bound and bountiful kin, I offer 12 loaves of bread. Governed by hunger, he wanted only not to want. What is the future beyond a premonition? What is the past beyond desire? To my brother, I leave a new suit, a tie made of silk and shoes with unscuffed bottoms. To the mirror, water. To the water, a book with no pages, the author's young face printed on the spine. I wanted children taller than any man on earth. If everyone was like me, I said to the mirror. To my lover, I leave enough stories to fill an evening, enough sleep to walk from one coast to another without pause. I held no counsel with God. I cut open the fruit of a tree without speaking to the tree. I ate food prepared by strangers. To the black cashier, I leave nothing. Her story is like the one I was given. To all the carpenters looking at the ceiling, nothing. Here, in the last moments of my illiterate future, may the people know I did not matter. Shoe prints at the door. Shoe prints on the old road. To the boy with two lights going on and off in his stare, I leave the riddle of the turtle who had shelter but no company. To the black girl, grace. To the black girl, mirrors. A father blessed with the gift of mind reading. Men who do not wound her. Men she does not wound herself for. And mother love. Unable to shed the old skin and stand, I stand here in the hour of my hours alive. These words want to answer your questions. These words want to stave off your suffering, but cannot. I leave them to you. Enough sky and a trail, wood and enough metal for machines. Tell me, what am I going to do when I'm dead? Let my shadow linger against the earth. protect my children. And then, I'll wind up with this poem. I'll stop with this one. Since it's a February, we can start with the February poem and end with the February poem. And this one's called The Avocado. I guess that's all you need to know. In 1971, drunk on the sweet, sweet juice of revolution, a crew of us marched into the president's office with a list of demands, the old man tells us at the February luncheon. And I'm pretending I haven't heard this one before as I eye black tortillas on a red plate beside a big green bowl of guacamole made from the whipped, battered remains of several harmless former avocados. If abolitionists had a flag, it would no doubt feature the avocado, also known as the alligator pear for obvious reasons. Number one, reparations. Enough gold to fill each of our women's wounds with gold. Gold to nurse our warriors waiting to enter this world with bright fists. That's what we told them, the man says. And I'm thinking of the money-colored flesh of the avocado. High in monosaturates, its oil content is second only to olives. I am looking at my wife's caterpillar locks dangle over her ear. I dare you to find a lovelier black woman from Cincinnati where the North touches the South. 3, we wanted more boulevards named for the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an airport named for Sojourner Truth. The roots of the avocado tree can raise pavement, so it's not too crazy to imagine the fruit as a symbol of revolt on the abolitionist flag. We are all one kind of abolitionist or another, no doubt. And we are like the avocado too, with this inedible ruby-colored seed that can actually sprout from the inside when its fruit is over-mature, causing internal molds and breakdown. Demand number 21, a Harriet Tubman statue on the mall. The man is weeping now and walking wet tissue to the trash can and saying, Harriet Tubman was a walking shadow. Or Harriet Tubman walked in shadows. Or to many, Harriet Tubman was a shadow to walk in. And the meaning is pureed flesh with lime juice, minced garlic, and chili powder. It is salt and the pepper Harriet Tubman tossed over her shoulder to trouble the bloodhounds. Many isolated avocado trees fail to fruit from lack of pollination. Goddamn, ain't you hungry? I whispered to my wife, and she puts a finger to my lips to distract me. Say, baby, wasn't that you waking me up last night to say you had a dream where I was a big, luscious, man-sized avocado? Actually, that's where the whole poem comes from. She actually had this dream. She woke up and said, I had a dream where you were like a big avocado in the bed beside her. And I was like, oh yeah. You put that in the poem. So anyway, okay, I'm sorry. Say, baby, wasn't that you waking me up last night to say you'd had a dream where I was a big, luscious, man-sized avocado? Someone's belly was growling. We weren't going to be colored. We weren't going to be Negro, the man says. And I'm thinking, every time I hear this story, it's the one telling the story that's the hero. Hush now, Harriet Tubman probably said near dawn, pointing a finger black enough to be her pistol barrel toward the future. Or pointing a pistol barrel black enough to be her finger at the mouth of some starved, stammering slave, and then lifting her head to listen for something that no one but her could hear. Thank you.
You know, no one ever told me that I had to be in a box when I was growing up, but I was in many, many different kinds of boxes, like playing basketball and then, you know, writing poetry and painting and singing, being on the chorus and being in a band and running track and being a son. And so all those different things. And I just thought poetry was a place for all those things to come together. You know, running with my friends, even if we talk about like kind of even urban poems and hip hop and breakdance. And I just never thought that I could only do one, or I didn't want to do one thing. And poetry was a place where I could be all those things and have all those things kind of get woven, because that's what metaphor is. It's saying like a dance is like a painting. And so I can put suddenly those two different sides of who I am into the same space. So that's why, I mean, I write poetry, and that's why I think I don't seem to fit into categories, because I just never was interested in that. And I thought that this, of all places, was the place where I didn't have to be in a category, and instead I could, you know, move around and have these things, the way these things are connected be reflected in the poems, I think. So, and you know, some of my poems are, many of my poems actually are about men, black men, masculinity, I think. Even the poems that are about women are about a man loving a woman or a man being a father, these kinds of things. And I knew for a long time that the reason that is essentially is because I grew up I had a father in the house who had been there since I was 4 or 5, but I didn't have my father. So just recently, like 2 years ago, I met my father, and he is a very open, you know, he touches and he holds and he does these things that I've never been used to, but that somehow was what I was. So I'm working through these ideas about what's genetic and what's not genetic. So I think I've always been a very open person, I think, and it's just interesting to kind of see this person and think, wow, is that where I get that from? You know, because I definitely there are things that I get from my father, this is my father, the man who raised me from the time that I was 4, I call my father. And this other person is, you know, my biological father. And it's interesting to look at how open he is, I think, and think, wow, you know, I never was quite sure. I don't think anybody was ever sure why I am the way that I am. So I can't necessarily attribute to poetry, but again, I think poetry was the best vehicle for my type of personality, whatever this personality is. It was there, and poetry just seemed like the natural space for it, if that makes sense. So the titles are always the hardest thing. Typically, if I can come up with a title before I come up with the poem's not going to happen. So ultimately, I kind of think, well, I got to let the poem do its work. And if it is doing its work, if it is layered and complex, and if there are a lot of intersections of ideas, then it's going to be a hard poem to title. So I typically will go with really short things like, you know, the avocado, because the avocado is in the poem, or, you know, the same city. But I typically try to not have the titles be the be-all to end-all, which is, I think, contrary to the way a lot of things happen in our society. Like, mostly it's all about the title of the car, you know, or the title of the band, those kinds of things, the title of the TV show, or the title of the movie, where the movie is not that great, but boy, that was a good title. It made me wanted to see it. So you know, I tend to work, you know, in the opposite direction and think the title isn't as significant as what's going on, you know, in the poem. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I'm that far from, you know, the corner, so to speak. Like I said, just to go back to this whole fatherhood thing, I had a man kind of coming and going in the house because he was stationed elsewhere. But I had friends and, you know, got into trouble, legal trouble with the law when I was in high school. And I did stuff like, you know, I played basketball. So the whole idea of being a black man who loved basketball, I played into all of those kinds of tropes, I guess, about what identity is. But I guess, again, to go back to what I think I said initially, I just never believed that you had to be tied down. In some ways, it's like people saying, oh, you are a black man. And when people say to you that you are a black man, they have all kinds of ideas, stories, cliches, stereotypes built into that. And our thing is like to not allow people to do that. Because you don't think that when people say, oh, you are a white man, like you don't have all kinds of ideas about what that means. That means nothing. If someone says, I met this white man, it means nothing. But if someone says, I met this black man, they think, oh, he must be cool, or he might be dangerous, or he might be a jock, or, you know, there's a series of little things that people come up with. And I just never wanted to play into those ideas, even if I thought I engaged some of them. So I wasn't embarrassed that I played basketball, or whatever other kinds of stereotypes there might be. But I just knew that I was also writing poems, and I wasn't going to be embarrassed about that either. And the same thing about like hardness and about cool. I wasn't embarrassed that I felt like I was a loving person. I wasn't embarrassed that I could say to my friends, or my friends never wanted to hear it. I say, oh, you know, man, I love you. You know, that's all right. I can say that. While my other friends were like saying, you know, that's not how we talk. That's not what the fellas do. And I thought, why not? You know, so again, playing into these kind of categories is really how you break out of the idea of like what you are, what your circumstances are. So that if you're on a corner, or if you're an ex-convict, or a high school dropout, or if you're a straight A student and you're an engineer and you feel like, again, there's just certain things you can't do because you have played into this role. I tend to think that, you know, being a human being is about more than like those adjectives of, you know, blackness or even maleness. I think, you know, if you're going to really fulfill the dream of being a human being, then you can't let people say you can go here but you can't go there. So, and that's what I've always believed. No one has ever told me that there was places I couldn't go. They might have discouraged me, but no one ever told me you are not allowed to go there. In terms of, and I don't even mean in terms of like, you know, physical black and white spaces. I mean, just again, spaces about what it means to be a man, be an artist, be a jock, be a father, be a brother, all those things. I felt like I can be all those things at once. So, and I hope that that's what people can get from my poems. And I feel like my own success just comes from that. From like to be a human being means to, say yes to all the possibilities of, humanness, of humanity.